A 24-year-old real estate agent pulls up outside an empty house to conduct what should have been a routine house viewing. But she'd already told the people closest to her that something about the showing didn't feel right. She even considered cancelling. Her father urged her not to go alone, but opportunities like this didn't come around often. Less than 20 minutes after greeting the prospective buyers and leading them into the empty house, she was dead. Her name was Lindsay Buziak. Lindsay was born on November 2nd, 1983, and grew up in Canada alongside her older sister Sarah. Friends described Lindsay as smart, caring, and ambitious, the sort of person people warmed to quickly. By 2008, Lindsay was just 24 years old and had found her place in the competitive world of real estate, but it wasn't a career she'd stumbled into by accident. Her father, Jeff Buziak, had spent around 3 decades in the industry himself, and Lindsay threw herself into building a name of her own. After starting out with the Maverick Group, she joined Remax Camerson in Victoria, British Columbia, where colleagues viewed her as a rising talent. She was the kind of person who worked hard enough that success didn't feel like a matter of if, but when. Lindsay was building a life in Victoria. She had people who loved her and plans for the future. From the outside, she appeared to be exactly where she wanted to be. But privately, those closest to her were beginning to hear a very different story. For all the success Lindsay was finding professionally, her personal life had become increasingly complicated. She met Jason Zylo while studying for her real estate exams. Jason was attentive. He'd bring her coffee at work and find excuses to be around her. And before long, the two started dating. On paper, they seemed well suited. Jason worked as a mortgage broker and was part of the same Remax office where Lindsay worked. His mother, Shirley, held a management position there, and the Zylo family was well known within Victoria's real estate community. But as the relationship became more serious, Lindsay's doubts began to grow. Shirley had purchased a waterfront property for the couple, and the two eventually moved there together. While some might have seen it as generous, Lindsay increasingly felt there were strings attached. Those closest to her said she viewed Shirley as controlling and demanding, and described Jason as possessive. By late 2007, she was opening up to friends and family about how unhappy she'd become. She told her father she felt she'd made a mistake and no longer saw a future with Jason. Eventually, Lindsay decided she wanted out and planned to move back to Victoria. But despite her doubts, the relationship didn't end. Instead of separating, the couple eventually left the waterfront property and moved into a condo in Victoria. But the change of scenery didn't resolve the problems that had been building between them. During a visit to Calgary, she opened up to her father once again. According to Jeff, Lindsay again expressed doubts about Jason. She also told him she'd seen something she shouldn't have. When he asked what she meant, she wouldn't explain and said she'd tell him later. But unfortunately, that later never came. In the days leading up to Christmas, an incident left Lindsay's friend Nikki deeply unsettled. While at the condo Lindsay shared with Jason, the two women openly discussed Lindsay's intention to leave the relationship, believing Jason was asleep. Instead, they discovered he'd been listening from outside the door. Nikki left immediately, with Lindsay following her shortly after. Despite everything, the relationship appeared to improve over Christmas. After receiving expensive gifts from Jason and being treated to a ski trip to Whistler, friends noticed a change in Lindsay. She seemed happier and decided to give the relationship another chance. In late January 2008, while Lindsay was focused on her career and continuing to build her reputation, she received a phone call. It seemed like the opportunity every young real estate agent hopes for. The caller explained that she and her husband had recently relocated to Victoria and needed somewhere to live immediately. They weren't interested in browsing for months or weighing up dozens of options, and with a budget of around $1 million, They weren't looking for just any home. They wanted a large property with at least 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious master suite, separate quarters for a nanny or housekeeper, and, most importantly, they wanted to complete the purchase within days. For Lindsay, this wasn't just another showing. The commission from a sale like this would have been substantial. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that could help accelerate her career. But despite the excitement, something about the call unsettled her. When Lindsay tried to describe the caller's accent, she couldn't quite place it. She described it as Mexican, or what she called a kind of broken Spanish. Eventually, she began to wonder whether it was genuine at all. Then another detail bothered her. The caller had contacted Lindsay directly on her personal cell phone. When asked how she'd obtained the number, the woman claimed she had been referred by a previous client. Lindsay tried to verify the referral, but couldn't get hold of the person involved. Despite her concerns, she continued with the arrangement. She saved the number in her BlackBerry under a simple label, $1 million. She began searching for homes that matched the couple's requirements and eventually sent over a short list of suitable properties. One quickly stood out, 1702 D'Souza Place. The newly built executive home appeared to offer everything the couple had asked for, a large vacant property in an affluent neighborhood, ready for immediate occupancy and comfortably within their budget. Before long, they requested a viewing for Saturday, February 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Lindsay already had plans that evening. A close friend was celebrating her bachelorette party, and no one would have blamed her for handing the viewing to another agent or rearranging it for another day. But with it being such a big opportunity, she agreed to go. Even then, the uneasy feeling never completely disappeared. She mentioned the clients to those around her, including her father, who urged her not to meet them alone. Jason promised he would remain nearby during the viewing, and Shirley reportedly offered to handle the appointment herself. Lindsay thanked her, but declined. She wanted to see it through. Still looking for some reassurance, she asked the office receptionist to check whether the couple appeared anywhere in company records, but nothing came back. On the day of the showing, the woman called Lindsay's office landline, and this time, Jason happened to answer. She stated she would call Lindsay's cell phone instead. Later, he would describe the accent much the same way Lindsay had, saying it sounded like broken Spanish, and even referred to the prospective buyers as the Mexicans. Not long afterwards, there was a change of plans. The husband contacted Lindsay to say his wife would no longer be attending the viewing and that he would arrive alone. This latest change only added to Lindsay's anxiety. But by late afternoon that Saturday, despite all of her reservations, Lindsay chose to go ahead with the appointment. Unfortunately, the final hours of Lindsay's life were about to begin. Before Lindsay left for the showing, she met Jason for a late lunch at Source Restaurant. Even then, with only hours to go before the appointment, she found herself going back over the details once again. The $1 million clients, the strange accent, the feeling she couldn't quite shake. Jason encouraged her to go through with it. He reminded her that he'd be close by if she needed him, and he reassured her that everything would be fine. At 4:24 p.m., they paid the bill and left separately. Lindsay is believed to have returned home to change. Friends said she always took pride in her appearance, and if these clients were genuinely wealthy buyers, she wanted to make a good impression. At approximately 5:29 p.m., Lindsay arrived at 1702 D'Souza Place. Using the electronic lockbox attached to the property, she retrieved the house key. Witnesses nearby later described seeing her standing outside the vacant home as 2 people approached, a man and a woman. Both were described as Caucasian and smartly dressed. The man was said to be around 6 feet tall with dark hair and a medium build. He was well dressed and wore a light or medium colored jacket, while the woman, believed to be between 35 and 45 years old, had short blonde hair that police would later suggest may have been a wig. What many remembered most clearly was her distinctive dress, patterned with bold swirls of white, black, and either red or pink. The 3 exchanged greetings, and Lindsay shook their hands before introducing herself. Witnesses later said she behaved as though she had never met either of them before and showed no obvious signs of fear or concern. Moments later, Lindsay led the pair through the front door and closed it behind them. Inside, she began showing the couple around the house. For a time, the viewing appeared to proceed normally. Eventually, they made their way upstairs and into the master bedroom. What happened over the next few moments isn't entirely clear, but it's believed Lindsay was caught completely off guard. She was stabbed repeatedly. Some reports claim more than 40 times, including to her chest, head, and throat, although the full autopsy findings have never been publicly released. But one detail did stand out. Lindsay had no defensive wounds, no signs she'd fought back, and no injuries suggesting she'd tried to shield herself. Investigators concluded she was likely attacked from behind with little or no warning. The assault lasted only minutes. Sometime during those few frantic moments, at approximately 5:41 p.m., Lindsay's BlackBerry suddenly placed a call to a friend she hadn't spoken to in some time. Police believe it was accidental, the result of buttons being pressed during the violent struggle. The call went to voicemail. Investigators later reviewed the recording, hoping it might contain some clue as to what had happened. Instead, all they could make out were muffled sounds. Nothing they believed could help identify the people responsible. Inside the house, Lindsay lay dying. Outside, no alarms had been raised, and the people on their way to the house had no idea what they were about to walk into. Just over an hour earlier, Jason had said goodbye to Lindsay outside Source Restaurant at 4:24 p.m. Before heading to D'Souza Place, he drove to SHC Auto Repair, where he met Cullen Oakman. Cullen was both a mortgage partner and hockey teammate, although later accounts suggest the two men weren't especially close. According to security footage, Jason and Cullen remained there until approximately 5:30 p.m., when they climbed into Jason's Range Rover and set off towards the showing. But getting there wasn't as straightforward as expected. The house at D'Souza Place was newly built, and according to Jason, didn't appear properly in his GPS system. During the drive, he called Lindsay for directions. The conversation was brief, as Lindsay cut the call short, telling Jason that the clients had arrived. A short time later, at approximately 5:38 p.m., Jason sent her a text message saying, "Just a couple of minutes away," but she never opened it. By then, investigators believe the attack may already have been underway inside the house. Jason and Cullen arrived in the area sometime between 5:40 and 5:45 p.m. As they drove past the house, it was already beginning to get dark outside. The lights inside were on, and through the mottled glass of the front door, they could make out two silhouettes moving inside. Believing the viewing was still underway, they assumed everything was normal. Jason later explained that he didn't want to come across as an overbearing boyfriend, so he parked nearby and waited. As the minutes passed without any response to his texts or calls, his concern gradually began to grow. By around 6:05 p.m., the silence had become impossible to ignore. Jason and Cullen got out of the Range Rover and walked towards the house. They knocked on the front door, rang the bell, and called Lindsay's name, expecting her to appear at any moment. Peering through the glass, Jason noticed Lindsay's shoes sitting in the foyer. Those who knew her said she routinely removed them during showings, but despite her shoes being there, she wasn't answering. Both the front and side doors were locked, so Jason checked the electronic lockbox and saw the key was gone. Unable to get inside, Jason called Shirley in the hope she could provide the garage code to access the house, but she couldn't help. By now, concern had turned into panic. Jason called 911 and explained that his girlfriend was inside conducting a viewing, that she'd been uneasy about the appointment from the beginning, and that they couldn't get into the property. While he was speaking to the dispatcher, Cullen kept looking for another way in. That's when he found a gap in the backyard fence where several boards had been kicked out. He squeezed through, headed into the garden, and spotted the rear patio door was open. He called out to Jason, and while still on the phone with 911, Jason explained that they'd found another way into the house. Once inside, Cullen started checking the lower level, while Jason headed upstairs. What he found at the top would stay with him for the rest of his life. Bloody footprints lead to the master bedroom. Inside, Lindsay was slumped against the wall, surrounded by blood. Jason immediately tried to help by beginning CPR. He would describe hearing nothing except the sound of air escaping through the wounds in her body. At approximately 6:11 p.m., another 911 call was placed to tell dispatchers that Lindsay had been found, and within minutes, police would arrive at 1702 D'Souza Place. Officers were met by Jason and Cullen waving them towards the property from an upstairs bedroom window. Police and paramedics entered the house and made their way upstairs, but despite their efforts, there was nothing they could do. Lindsay was pronounced dead at the scene. Within hours, investigators had already reached one crucial conclusion. Whoever walked into D'Souza Place that evening hadn't stumbled across an opportunity. They had come for Lindsay. Police secured the home as K9 units searched the surrounding area and detectives canvassed neighboring streets for witnesses. Meanwhile, Jason and Cullen were interviewed separately. Jason was interviewed repeatedly, took part in a videotaped reenactment, and later underwent a polygraph examination, which police said he passed. Investigators stated that surveillance footage supported his account and that he had cooperated throughout the investigation. Cullen's account was also examined and verified. Eventually, both men were released without charge. Back at the house, forensic teams searched for anything the killers might have left behind, but the scene itself painted a clear picture. Lindsay's purse, money, watch, and phone had all been left behind, and there was no evidence of sexual assault. Everything pointed towards the same conclusion. Lindsay had been deliberately targeted. The question was why. One clue stood out immediately: the number Lindsay had saved in her BlackBerry under the name $1 Million. Investigators traced the phone used to arrange the viewing. Purchased in Vancouver weeks before the murder and registered under the name Paulo Rodriguez, police believed the identity was fake. The phone remained inactive until shortly before Lindsay's death, contacted her several times, traveled from Vancouver to Victoria the day before the murder, and was never used again after February 2nd. The false identity, carefully arranged viewing, and precision of the attack led some to speculate that Lindsay had been the victim of a contract killing. Regardless of the motive, the identities of the man and woman who arrived at D'Souza Place remain one of the biggest mysteries in the case. As the investigation expanded, detectives explored other possible motives. Public suspicion naturally fell on people close to Lindsay, including Jason and a former boyfriend, but neither man was ever charged. Attention also turned to a conversation Lindsay had with her father weeks before her death, when she told him she'd seen something she shouldn't have, but never explained what she meant. That conversation resurfaced when investigators examined possible links to a major Alberta drug investigation known as Operation High Noon. Some theorized Lindsay had stumbled across information she was never supposed to know, or had been mistaken for an informant. Police rejected those theories, stating there was no evidence Lindsay had been involved in drug trafficking or had assisted investigators. Then came one of the strangest stories connected to the case. Later that year, Lindsay's friend Nikki reported receiving a late-night phone call from a woman whose accent immediately reminded her of the one Lindsay had described before her death. Nikki later claimed that when she called the number back, Shirley Zylo answered and explained that she had intended to call a different Nikki. Shirley later denied the incident had ever happened, and police have never confirmed whether phone records supported Nikki's account. As the years passed, the case refused to fade away. Much of that was due to Lindsay's father, Jeff, who became the public face of the search for answers. Jeff often returned to the conversation they'd had just weeks before Lindsay's death. If she had told him what she'd seen, he later said he would have begged her to walk away. In 2021, investigators revisited the case with support from the RCMP and the FBI, after advances in forensic analysis, generated new leads. But despite those efforts, one belief has never changed. Police remain convinced that Lindsay was deliberately targeted and lured to D'Souza Place. They have repeatedly stated that someone, somewhere, knows the truth. The question is whether that truth lies in Lindsay's personal life, her career, or something she believed she was never supposed to see. And if it does, what exactly was it that Lindsay saw? Despite years of investigation, Lindsay's murder remains unsolved. No one has been charged, and the reason she was chosen remains unknown.